So I did my research on red meat and aerobic athletic performance. And my name is Cyrus, as you said. So, an intro. My name is Cyrus. This is my mentor right here, and I'm from Chapel Hill, North Carolina. You guys may know University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. I live around 5 minutes from campus, actually. And why did I choose to research this topic? So I play soccer for this league called MLS Next. It's a high level league in North America, and to become the best player I can, I wanted to do everything in my ability to recover better, perform better, things like that. And some of the stuff that I was doing research on was diet and nutrition that had a lot to do with performance. And because of uh, this passion in nutrition, and also I noticed that I consumed a lot of red meat, and I saw a lot of stuff online about how red meat could be beneficial. It could be like not so good for your health. And this is a picture of a steak right here, but just I wanted to see in my own hands and do research myself to see um how red meat actually affects aerobic athletes. So my methods, the majority of my articles are review articles. I reviewed around 10 other articles that were published. And I also made a survey for aerobic athletes at various levels, um, the professional, uh, the professional, collegiate, club, and high school level, to see how the interplay of red meat consumption, protein consumption, type of red meat consumed, etc., and how that affect performance. And the way I kind of grew performance was I asked respondents to rate energy, stamina, recovery, focus slash mental clarity, and sleep on a scale of 1 to 10. And I got around 200 respondents in this survey. All right, what is an aerobic athlete? So an aerobic athlete is an athlete who relies on aerobic endurance, using oxygen to boost energy over a long period of time. And some examples of this are soccer players, people that swim, running, and cycling. So what is red meat? Just to get some terms straight. Red meat is meat that comes from mammals, and it contains high amounts of myoglobin, which explains the red color in the meat. And some examples of this are beef, lamb, pork, goat, and venison. So what is processed red meat? In the 19th and 20th century, in turn with industrialization, many foods started becoming more processed, and meat and red meat was one of these, and made into things such as bacon, deli meats, hot dogs, and ham. And these things are widely consumed, and processed red meat are definitely less beneficial than red meat. And some reasons for this are that processed red meat contains up to 4 times as much salt as unprocessed red meat, as well as chemical preservatives and nitrates to improve taste, texture, and shelf life. And elevated consumption of processed red meats is known to cause colorectal cancer and diabetes. Muscle protein synthesis. So this is a important process that happens in athletics, specifically for aerobic athletes, in which microscopic muscle fibers are torn from mechanical stress, such as working out. And for in this process, these muscle fibers are broken down, and they are with the correct nutrition and recovery, they're built back up in this process called hypertrophy. And that is how you become stronger. That is how your muscles become bigger. And we will see that red meat could have a beneficial role in that. And right here, you can see that process kind of. So, history of red meat and humans. So, our ancestors around 3 to 4 million years ago lived as hunter gatherers, as you may know. And consumption of meat in our ancestors' diets resulted in adaptations such as encephalization, which describes the increase of brain surplus, the mass of the brain, as well as altered gut structures. And animal foods became a dominant source of energy, protein, fatty acids, vitamin B12, iron, and zinc. And as presently, as global meat intake is dropping and red meat intake is dropping, there is a challenge to adequately compensating for the loss of nutritional value using foods that are not meat. So this slide evaluates how high quality red meat is compared to other protein sources, and I use the digestible indispensable amino acid scale, also known as the DIAS scale, which is a modern method for rating protein quality based on how well the amino acid profile is and how the protein is digested and absorbed. As you can see here, red meat contains a higher score than legumes, nuts, cereal foods, and from this we can understand that our ancestors shifted from a diet high in bulky plants and low digestibility to a diet higher with higher quality protein, such as red meat and meat in general. So could red meat be an optimal source of protein for aerobic athletes? In addition to what I just discussed, red meat is a high quality, could be a high quality protein for muscle recovery and has the complete profile for amino acids. A study I used said red meat is a very good source of bioactive molecules that can help the body recover and maintain optimal health. And red meat contains micronutrients such as vitamin B12, iron, zinc, as well as bioactive components such as taurine, creatine, carnitine, and many others. So these are some harmful aspects of red meat. In general, red meat is high in LDL, high in saturated fat and cholesterol, which may increase the risk of heart disease, as well as processed red meat being carcinogenic. And red meat being highly caloric in nature is a thing that affects everyone, athletes and or mainly I would say people that consume red meat in general, but red meat for athletes that do a lot of workouts, a lot of practice, a lot of games, the highly caloric nature does not matter as much. And also red meat may promote inflammation. So for my survey, as I mentioned earlier, these are some of the questions I asked. So I asked for demographics such as age, sport, level, sex, how many servings of red meat one consumed per week, how many servings of non-red meat protein were consumed per week, kind of red meat consumed, and energy, stamina, focus, and sleep, which were all kind of considered into the performance. And I evaluated how these different respondents answered to how their performance was, and then I use that to see what type of red meats they're consuming, their protein consumption in general, and how that kind of had a effect on it. So the results of my survey found that with around 200 respondents, that the survey that athletes with lower than average red meat consumption had better performance in general, and athletes with higher than average processed red meat consumptions had worse performance. And around 60% of red meat consumption was in the form of processed red meat. And this was out of all the respondents that answered the question. So, and this is coming more towards the conclusion now. So that showed that the survey showed that in athletes that consumed red meat, in processed red meat in general, performance was lower. So try to keep that lower, as well as red meat consumption being in excess, being in more than the recommended servings can also be worse for your performance in general. So for optimal performance, some things that can be optimized are, this is just in general for aerobic athletes, complex carbohydrates for quick fuel, healthy fats, which provide long-term energy and, for extended activity, water and electrolytes for hydration, and protein for recovery and performance. And some key takeaways are that red meat is sometimes confused with processed red meat, but this study in the survey shows that processed red meats, as discussed earlier, hot dogs, bacon, deli meats, ham, things of that nature are substantially different and have substantially different effects on your performance, on your diet, on how you feel, on your sleep, on all those aspects I mentioned earlier. And red meat, as long as red meat is consumed in a balanced proportion under the recommended guidelines, red meat can be beneficial for aerobic athletic performance. And just to say how my diet is now, I'm focusing on definitely having adequate red meat consumption, but focusing on a balance between whole foods, fruits, vegetables, things like that. And I think that for all of us, red meat can be beneficial if you do eat meat. It can definitely be beneficial, as stated earlier. It can provide essential nutrients, vitamins, minerals, but not to eat it in excess. And that is my presentation.
Wonderful job, Cyrus. That was really interesting. I have a quick question if you don't
Yeah,
mind. So I know you mentioned you had about 200 respondents, which
yeah.
is a considerable amount of individuals. Given the different demographics that you asked or surveyed, did you notice any key trends among differences in age, the sport that they played that were interesting to you?
Uh, so I definitely noticed that college students, and the collegiate athletes that I did interview had higher, or had lower red meat consumption because they were eating at the dining hall. And they included that in some of their responses, as well as younger kids, such as teenagers on my club soccer team, teenagers that played high school sports had higher red meat consumptions.
Interesting. Yeah, that makes sense. They have a little less control over their diet, given that, they're at the dining hall or, a parent
Yeah.
or guardian is cooking for them.
Yeah.
In addition to that, I'm sure you've seen a lot of growing literature on animal-based diets and
Yeah.
the kind of importance that they might serve for athletes or general population. How would you respond to someone who promoted an animal-based diet?
Definitely an anyways diet. If you're considering it as just having meat, raw dairy, eggs, honey, and fruit, I would say all of those things are beneficial and they're away from the processed foods that we have been edging more towards, such as like things containing seed oils, processed sugars, stuff like that. So I would definitely promote it. But an animal-based diet is really it's kind of extreme for most people. And I would say it's just important to balance foods and not really try to go towards like that animal-based diet, like something that's not attainable. Just focus on what you can do, and try to stay as consistent as possible and just know to yourself what type of diet you can stay consistent with.
And for our other panelists today, I know a few of you focused on nutrition, diets. Were there anything from Cyrus's presentation that you found connected to your work or that you had questions about as well? For our panelists, you can feel free to come off of mute and turn your camera on if you would like to ask a question. Looks like I have a question here in the chat to myself. Um, Cyrus, how would you say that changing your diet has impact your performance?
So definitely consuming a lot more red meat around 1 to 2 years ago. I have noticed that I feel better. I have like more mental clarity and definitely in the classroom and such as like in things like writing this, I can stay more focused and more on task, eating less red meat. I don't know, like how much eating red meat affects that. But also, I have seen that my performance has stayed and my recovery has stayed at a high level. So red meat's not like the one essential thing that's necessary for recovery. Like a lot of other components, I have continued, such as getting adequate sleep, hydration, stuff like that. And red meat might it's shifting me towards the like mindset of red meat might not have like that big of an aspect. And there's a bunch of other like I would say substitutes that you can use in your diet if you don't consume red meat.
And following your research, what are the next steps for you? Would you continue this in any way, or will you try to share this information on a larger scale with the individuals you surveyed or athletes in general?
Yeah, so I actually did include a option on the survey to opt in for my paper for me to send it to them towards the end. And I'm almost done publishing my paper, so I'll definitely send that. And I'm actually passionate about entrepreneurship, and I definitely want to pursue something in entrepreneurship and nutrition and wellness in the future. And I think this it um this research on diet has definitely helped expand my view and help me become more knowledgeable in this field. And yeah.
Well, thank you so much for sharing today, and excited to see where this leads to you in your future.